At exactly 5:47 a.m., airports across the country froze. Boarding passes stopped scanning. TSA officers stepped away from their booths. And a quiet message flashed on internal airline screens. Effective immediately. New rules are live. Most passengers had no idea that the way they traveled was about to change forever. It started without warning. On a random Tuesday morning in early 2026, travelers lined up like they always did, coffee in hand, eyes half open, thinking only about reaching their gates on time. But within minutes, confusion spread. Some passengers were pulled aside. Others were told to repack their bags. A few were denied boarding entirely, even though their tickets were valid. That's when the news alerts hit phones all at once. Airline crackdowns begin. TSA enforces new 2026 travel rules. Behind the scenes, airlines had been under pressure for months. Rising security threats, fake identities, ticket abuse, and viral in-flight chaos had pushed regulators to the edge. According to insiders, the government gave airlines a simple ultimatum: tighten control, or face shutdowns. So they chose control. The first wave of changes focused on identity verification. Passengers who had flown for years without issues suddenly found their names flagged for manual review. Even minor mismatches, a missing middle name, an old passport photo, or inconsistent booking details, were enough to stop a journey cold. TSA officers were no longer just checking IDs. They were cross-verifying behavior, booking history, and travel patterns in real time. Travelers noticed officers asking new questions, not loudly, not aggressively, but precisely. Who booked your ticket? When did you pack your bag? Is this your usual route? For many, it felt less like an airport and more like an interrogation room. Airlines quietly updated their terms overnight. Hidden clauses now allowed them to deny boarding without refund if a passenger failed enhanced compliance checks. Social media exploded with videos of confused travelers arguing at gates, claiming they did nothing wrong. But officials insisted this was only the beginning. By the end of that day, one thing was clear. Flying in 2026 was no longer just about having a ticket. It was about passing a system designed to know more about you than ever before. And this was only part one of the crackdown. The next phase would change what you could carry, how early you must arrive, and who gets watched the closest, even after takeoff. By the second week of the crackdown, passengers began noticing a pattern. Things you could once carry freely were now restricted. Not just liquids and gels, but electronics, chargers, even notebooks in some cases. TSA officers weren't just scanning bags, they were analyzing each item for intent, often asking travelers to demonstrate exactly how devices worked or why they carried them. Airline employees whispered about new AI monitoring systems. Cameras and sensors weren't just for security, they tracked behavior patterns in lines, at check-ins, and even while waiting at the gate. Any sudden movements, prolonged pauses, or unusual gestures could trigger alerts. Those alerts could lead to secondary screening, sometimes for hours. A mother traveling with her 2 kids described the surreal experience. They asked me to unpack my bag, and then my kids' bags, and then my purse. Every little thing had to be explained. By the time we reached the gate, our flight had already boarded without us. Airlines, meanwhile, were quietly rewarding compliance. Passengers who scanned smoothly through TSA checks were offered perks, priority boarding, upgraded seats, and even waived baggage fees. But failing the system, even once, could blacklist a traveler temporarily, meaning future trips could be denied entirely. Rumors spread fast online. Some claimed flights were being rerouted mid-air, not for weather, but because passenger profiles triggered risk alerts. Other stories spoke of cameras inside aircraft cabins, used to monitor behavior for the first 30 minutes after takeoff. Airlines denied it publicly, but whispers persisted. The takeaway: travel was no longer just about planning a trip. It had become a test. Next, the crackdown would hit the boarding process itself, and some travelers would face consequences before even stepping on the plane. By mid-January 2026, the boarding process had transformed into something almost unrecognizable. Travelers who had flown hundreds of times suddenly found themselves stopped in their tracks, sometimes literally, as gates turned into checkpoints for behavior, history, and compliance. At one major hub, the scene was chaotic. Hundreds of passengers pressed against stanchions, their eyes darting at TSA officers pacing like hawks. Electronic displays now flashed real-time alerts, showing which travelers needed extra screening. Some gates were even locked remotely, leaving entire flights grounded while individuals were pulled aside. John, a business traveler, recounted his nightmare. "I arrived an hour early, thinking I was safe. Then an officer scanned my boarding pass, looked at me, and said, 'You're flagged. Follow me.' I had no idea what I'd done wrong. What came next was disorienting. His carry-on was opened and scanned 3 times, electronics powered on and off, receipts and ID cards cross-checked. Every minor hesitation, reaching for a pen, adjusting a bag, seemed to trigger further scrutiny. Meanwhile, flight attendants whispered of new, compliance codes, transmitted directly to the cockpit. Pilots could now receive alerts if any passenger had a flagged profile, even mid-flight, meaning flights could delay takeoff or divert based on an algorithm's assessment of risk. Social media exploded with videos. One clip showed a man being escorted away mid-boarding, while passengers around him murmured in fear, "Could it happen to any of us?" Another video captured a gate full of travelers frantically repacking after officers ordered them to remove electronics, liquids, and even small notebooks. The airport had become a maze of tension. What used to be routine, a simple walk to your gate, now felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of uncertainty. Anxiety ran high, and tempers flared as travelers realized, in 2026, one small mistake could ruin your entire trip. And yet, for those who passed the scrutiny, the system rewarded compliance almost instantly: priority boarding, free upgrades, and perks designed to make travelers forget the chaos, at least temporarily. But the final phase of the crackdown was even more alarming: in-flight enforcement. What happened once you were in the air would change everything. Part 4 will reveal the shocking in-flight reality, and how passengers realized there was no safe moment anymore. By February 2026, passengers who thought boarding was the worst part were in for a shock at 30,000 feet. Airlines had quietly implemented in-flight compliance monitoring, turning the cabin into a fully observed zone. Cameras, sensors, and subtle AI systems tracked behavior, speech patterns, and even seating movements. Emma, traveling for a long overdue family reunion, described the unsettling reality. "I felt like I was being watched constantly. The flight attendants were polite, but every question felt calibrated. Can you please confirm your seat number again? Did you pack your own bag?" I realized they weren't asking casually. They were checking for inconsistencies. Even small actions, reaching under the seat for a laptop, leaning forward to retrieve a drink, could trigger a notification to the cockpit. Pilots, now directly linked to TSA and airline security servers, could report a behavioral alert mid-flight. That meant a plane could divert, delay landing, or even contact authorities if someone triggered a high-risk profile. Some passengers who failed these in-flight checks were quietly isolated, moved to a compliance row, with extra staff monitoring their every action. Others found that electronic devices were restricted during flight, not just for safety, but to prevent any communication that might contradict their pre-verified profile. Social media warnings went viral, travelers sharing videos and stories of flights delaying by hours because a single passenger failed a behavioral assessment. One viral clip showed a family quietly arguing with a flight attendant while the plane circled the airport, waiting for clearance from ground security. By the time 2026 fully arrived, one thing was undeniable: air travel had changed forever. It wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. It was about passing a living, watching system at every stage: check-in, security, boarding, and even mid-air. For passengers, the new mantra became simple, terrifying, and impossible to ignore. Follow every rule perfectly, or risk being grounded, delayed, or worse, watched. And as airlines rolled out more technology and rules, experts warned this was only the beginning. The 2026 crackdown wasn't just a policy. It was a revolution in how we travel, observe, and control the skies. The era of carefree flying was over.